specific gravity, what's his level of energy. Then she's using it from class 3 on tools of maturity. He's a feeling child, and he loves to be touched. And she said, okay, if you do just this first line of letters here, I'll come over and I'll write the letters on your back. He loved to have the letters written on his back. And whoa, he sat down and whipped through those letters. And all of a sudden, what had been like this in the class, well, I mean, I don't mean she's literally. This isn't literal. I'm depicting energy, right? You know, do it. No, I'm not going to do it. Please do it. I don't want to, you know.
Doing it wrong.
Yeah. All of a sudden, it became this flow of energy where they're in cooperation. Because from her center, she felt, well, what's inside him? What's he feeling? How can I help him make that next step? And sometimes the energy does get stuck for thousands of different reasons. You know, like if the room is overheated, if it's after lunch. I remember if it's at the end of the day. Do you all remember, I think it was the very last handwriting class we had, so it's about 4:45 in the afternoon. You all have been here since 8:30 in the morning. And Karen was giving a wonderful handwriting class. Everybody's into it, but the room faced west, and we had the heat on because it was cold out, but then we all filled it up, and nobody turned the heat down. The sun was streaming in, heating it up more. And Karen noticed that everybody was looking sleepy. And I was in the back of the room, so I didn't know that. I just know that she said, okay, everybody, stand up. And we all stood up, and she said, okay, we're going to write our F's with our arms. Everybody hold your arm out and do a cursive F. And she had us doing all that, and I just thought it was part of her lesson plan. Later, she told me, oh, everybody was going to sleep. I must have been boring them to tears. I said, no, I don't think you were boring them to tears. It was 4:45 in the afternoon. And the energy was going, we're not heavy people, but the energy was getting heavy, wasn't it? And so what's the answer when the energy gets heavy? Move. Action is the answer. And how many of you have ever had something happen in your class where it was like that and you realized, nothing's happening. They're not hearing a word I'm saying. Has that ever happened? So, and what do we do? Okay, I only have 2 more things. Can you sit still and listen? And they go, and they sit still, but they're not. And maybe they're even listening. Are they receiving it? No, because they're not in that state of relaxed alertness anymore. And so this is why in our schools, we can spend so much less time on academics than other schools spend, and yet our kids, when they are tested on academics, are on level or ahead of other kids. Why is that? Because we create the state of absorption, of receptivity, before we teach. We don't just try to teach over somebody's hurt, and their feelings are hurt because of something that was said outside, or somebody needs water, or whatever the conditions are. So all the time we're thinking of, how can I change the energy when it's not right? So sometimes people get really sleepy and down. Sometimes they actually get negative. We give them something to do and they go, I can't do that. And if it's 1 or 2 people, they have a block and we need to figure out how to work with it. But Selene told us a story recently of how she asked the kids to do something in Spanish, and next thing she knew, she had 2 kids crying. And everybody was going, and she thought, oh my gosh, what did I do? I thought they were ready for this, but they're not. She didn't try to talk them into it. She didn't try to explain why they were ready. She didn't try to say, here's the reason you can do this if you try harder. Oh, don't say try harder to kids, because what does that mean? It means you're not trying, you know. You can say do your best. Did you know muscle testing shows that if you say to a person do your best, they're strong. If you say try hard, because try hard contains you might not succeed in it. Do your best. You can't fail at doing your best, you know. But I digress. I do that a lot, sorry. So Selene saw that, and what did she do? She said, oh, okay, put down your pencils. Come to the back of the room. And she started playing a Spanish game with them that she'd played before, that she knew they knew how to play and they could be successful, and got them back on board before she tried to teach something else in the class. So what we want to do right now, because I think you guys are getting just a little bit hazy there, and I know I am, I need some water, is we're going to break up into groups, and we're going to have brainstorming groups. And what I want you to brainstorm together is, 10 or 15 ways to change the energy in your class. So if it's negative, if things aren't going well, here's another example. You can often tell where the energy is going just by always by their body language. And there's just a certain, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but you can see 2 or 3 kids together on the playground, walking around, talking quietly, they're always looking down, and you know they're plotting and planning how to exclude somebody. Or something else, they're talking about somebody in a negative way. And it happens at other times too. And I know I walked into, and all my stories are about the intermediate class because, Tarina, you don't know this, but my office is in the same building. So not only in the same building, but there's not really a door to close, right, Lorna? So I know all the things that go on in there. And I went in one day, and this was several years ago. In fact, Priya, we saw that student last night, who's much older now, teenager. And I saw him walking around talking to some of the other kids in that tone, that energy, that, I don't know how to explain it except when you see it, you'll know it if you start looking. And I thought, what is he talking about? I knew it's up to no good. It was, or if he wasn't, something was wrong with it. So I kind of sidled close, pretending like I was looking somewhere else to hear what it was. And you know what he was talking about? He wasn't trying to make trouble. He's just trying to process. He had watched the news the night before, and it was right when Michael Jackson was arrested for sex abuse. So again, it's another example of how things that are the opposite of high-minded will bring the energy. They're not relaxed and alert and ready to learn. It's something else. They're troubled. He was troubled by it. And so how could I have changed the energy? And Sandy did it in that case. I walked over and said, Sandy, do you know what they're talking about? I told her, and she immediately, I won't tell you what she did because I want you to brainstorm. See what you can get. Maybe you can get 10 or 15 ways that you can just quickly change the energy in your class. And if you've read Calm and Compassionate Children, you might know a few from there. All of you who've been in the classroom know a few from what you tried to do. And if you don't worry, you'll be in a group with somebody who knows. So don't worry, all right? What group would like to share some of the ways you came up with to change the energy? Anybody volunteer to share? Beth.
Here. You want them all or just a few? We don't have 12, but I'll start from the bottom.
All right.
We said laughter and jokes.
Absolutely. It's really good to go to the public library, keep some, if you're a second grade teacher, keep some of those dumb riddles. They love them. But any kind of joke book that you can pull out and tell them a joke. Go ahead.
Games.
Uh-huh.
Taking a breath.
Uh-huh.
Food and water.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a lot more about food a little later. Keep going.
Music.
Uh-huh.
Pleasant images.
Ooh.
Pictures. Thinking challenges or challenges, more or less in your seat or whatnot.
Okay.
Super conscious living exercises.
Good.
Brain gym exercises.
Ooh. Okay, a different group that has a few different things. If you have a few different things, would you share them? Lorna.
We talked about reading a book or reading out loud. Games also, and the difference between familiar games that they're very easy to go into and other games that are more challenging if you're learning. And those are different ways of changing the energy differently. Simple noticing things and and projects. Rose was talking about her family loves doing projects together, and so she brings up let's all tackle this project together. They'll all get into it, unlike my children who don't do that. And I work with older kids that can read, so on the whiteboard I do challenges. I'll write just a silly word up on the board, or I'll put a math problem, or I'll do something. If they're all distracted and I won't say anything, I'll just start writing something up on the board which brings their attention, and then we can start talking about it together. I think the rest she mentioned.
Okay, any others? Did any group have something else? Helen, Melissa, did you guys have anything that wasn't mentioned already?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, we said candlelight.
Candlelight.
Lights off and on.
Turn off the lights. Anything?
Also changing environment.
Go outside. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes Trina brings her preschool over to the office on a field trip. For them, that's a field trip.
Ringing a bell.
Ringing a bell.
Kind of a noise, attention, so they have focused attention, so they have something to go rather than be all over the place.
Okay. If you'll excuse me 1 second, I need to give Karen a message. Go get Sandy. It's time for her to give out the stuff. Any more?
I think I said freeze, freeze. That's
Freeze.
Yeah, but that might be movement.
Mm-hmm.
Singing a song that's familiar.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Music, that's another form of music.
Yeah.
Instead of playing music, sing a
Yeah,
song.
Sing
Mhm.
a song. That's like grabs their attention. They know that what they're supposed to do at that particular time.
Good, yeah. So these are all absolutely great, valid ways. Also, there are different types of energy work that some of you may have heard of, and I'm not here to be a proponent of any of these, although I've tried all of them, and I've enjoyed all of them. And you never know, what's the placebo effect? You know, does it really work because we think it works? But at any rate, most of them involve movement and a coordinated series of movements. It's important that they're a coordinated series of movements. So tomorrow or later, tomorrow I think it is, that Helen is going to be demonstrating superconscious living exercises. Most of you know those. And it's a coordinated sense of group of movements. And that's important because the brain's a pattern recognition organ. So when we do things in patterns, it's laying down those pathways, those neural pathways that are important for learning. So I'm sort of stalling here because both Karen and Sandy are missing, and they are the next thing on the program.
Patterns are something that we brought up too, with different hand games and things that create patterns. That's a real great.
Clapping games, yes. So that's a good one that, you can always have the kids pair up and create a pattern that they can do together, or you just do a pattern and let the class repeat it. But these are different type energy work modalities that have touched on into education, and different elements of all of these you can just pull from them real quickly and change the energy. So, but before we do those, Sandy has arrived, and she's going to give you a little something that might also change the energy. So Sandy.
Also, you didn't give away what she was doing with your story. Do you want to give us the answer now?
The answer to the story about how she changed the energy when the kid was in the classroom talking about Michael Jackson. She said, I'm ready to read aloud now. And she started reading us the wonderful story that they're all involved in and they all want to hear. So just change the energy immediately.
So one thing that I used to do is I had a dog named Hannah, a big furry dog named Hannah that used to come to school with me a couple days a week. And she always changed the energy. And she was a real sweetie pie. So she was our mascot for years. If you look in the office at the school pictures, you'll see she's in there. In fact, one year she's up with the staff. Which was kind of true. So anyway, she was really sweet. And we don't have any real live animals for you today, but what we do have is we have stuffies. So you're going to get to choose a stuffy, and your stuffy is your pal for the day. So you need to decide how your stuffy and where your stuffy is going to be taken care of. So, your stuffy can't be stuffed in your bag or, just thrown under your chair, anything like that. So you need to make sure your stuffy is cared for. So you can find a nice seat. You can find it, a little buddy to play with somewhere. Or you can stick it in your shirt or things like that. I put some pictures up here of the year that I had 4 7th and 8th grade boys. This was in Washington, D.C., and we went to the Museum of Natural History, and they bought these little tigers, very much like the little tigers in here, and you could see this was on the subway. He had his stuffy the whole time in his shirt like this, hanging out, or they had these bags carried around. They had them in their bags here. Here we were at dinner. You have to look close at this one. Their stuffies were all on the table. all together in the, all four, so they were all together in the middle of the table, and whenever, something important happened, the stuffies got up and they were a part of it. And it was just hysterical to me to see these, 7th and 8th grade boys so into their stuffies like this, and it was a sweet trip. So, really can change the energy. And when you foster a school environment like that where that's okay, then it's perfectly fine. They didn't think anything about it. They weren't the least bit self-conscious about anything or anything. Did you tell the Edsel story yet?
I did not tell the Edsel story. You want to tell it?
Well, one of the years, what I'll do is I'm gonna pass these around, and you can take one and pass the bag along. So feel free to see what your choices are in there. Every year we have our Joy-a-thon, and at the end of the Joy-a-thon, all the kids can come up and choose a prize for participating. And so one year, or one year anyway, you had stuffies were one of the choices, and then there were other things, pencil holders and little toy balls and different things, so that everybody would have a choice. And so that year, the first person to choose was he in 6th grade that year? 6th grade boy. And she just, was glad that she had all these other things so everybody would have something. He came up, he chose a stuffy. That was his first choice out of all the things he could have had. And so after that, he set the precedent, oh, it's okay. And so a lot of the kids then chose stuffies like that. And it just sweetened the whole environment. So you all have your little charges there.
Now, sometimes in Sonali and Karen's class, the kids get distracted by the stuffies that they bring to school. They can bring stuffies to school, and occasionally, they bring them so much, they're not usually, but occasionally they get distracted. So then Sonali or Karen will say, okay, the stuffies are going to have a play date. Let's take them all over there and put them in the basket, and they can play together while we do our math. And the kids know there's no negotiating. We have to do that, and then we can go pick them up for recess. So we're going to demonstrate now, just very quickly, a few of the modalities of energy work that you could do with your kids. So who was going to do brain gym? Who was going to do body talk? That was Karen. What were you doing, Sandy?
EFT.
EFT. Okay, let's start with EFT.
How many of you have heard of EFT before? Great, a couple of you have. Okay. It's called the Emotional Freedom Technique, and it's a way of working with the energy centers in the body. It reminds me, it's similar to
The tapping.
yeah, it's tapping on different parts of the body, meridians of the body. And so one of the things, in fact, we even have a magazine, one of those free parent magazines. I think it's Northwest.
Family Matters.
Yeah, and every month, I guess it comes out, it's got an article on EFT, and they even have a little stuffy, speaking of stuffy, bear called Tappy Bear. And it has the little points to tap on the bear so you can help you remember, and you can also make sure your bear is tapped down. So
Do you have that in your school, the Tappy Bear?
we don't. We've seen it and admired it in the
I know.
magazine, though.
Yeah, that's
So-
as far as I've gotten.
So there's the basic tapping down technique, and so I'll have you do it with me. And it starts with, now the tapping is done not so that it hurts or causes bruising, but it's significant enough that you can really feel it when you're doing some tapping. So you're going to need both of your hands now. So make sure your stuffy is safe and that it's not going to fall. Okay, great. And so you're going to take both fingers, and we're going to tap right here in the bony part of the eye, like between the eye and the eyebrow. And you want to give it some good taps there. They say at least 7. I like to do a lot more than that. And then we're going to move to the bony part next to the eye on the temple here. And then to the bony part under the eye. And then you can move to one hand and go underneath the nose. And underneath the lower lip. down to just below the collarbones. We need both
Push
hands
her.
again. And then this is the fun one. This is going to be about 6 inches beneath your armpits on the sides of the body. And then on the outside of the hand. So we're going to do both sides. We're going to tap on the kind of the karate chop area is what they call it. And then the other side. Yes. And then relax. Anybody feel any difference in your energy? You all look very peaceful. This is actually a piece of a longer routine. There are other parts of it that if you're interested in learning, you go online, you can download his whole beginner's guide free, and you can look at it. And actually this part even has more, before the karate chop, there's some parts on the fingers. But the one we did is considered just the real basic one that you can do to help kids calm down and focus.
Thank you, Sandy. Before Karen does body talk, I just want to mention again that when you have a whole group do something together like that, it brings everybody into coherence. Now, coherence and entrainment are words that are used in science, and I don't know that I use them exactly correctly, but I do know that people such as Carla Hannaford, who has a PhD in biology, speaks of it a lot in her book called Smart Moves. And I know that Michael Mendiza, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's sort of the heir apparent to Joseph Chilton Pierce. In fact, I think he lives in Nevada City, Michael Mendiza. And all these people talk about how important coherence is within the person. That is, that your heart rate, when your heart rate is coherent, that means regular, then your brain waves are coherent and your breath. And each influences the other. You all know that. When you slow down your breathing, like in slow breathing techniques, then your heartbeat slows down and your brain waves change as well. Music can do it to you because music directly affects the respiration rate and other physiological things. But there's also a concept of coherence within a group. And so when we finished that, we had all done that together in the same rhythm. And it's really good to start the day with something like, it doesn't have to be that. There are 1,000 things, even calisthenics. As I said, I'm not here to sell this technique and to say, you know, this is the be-all, end-all that will solve everything. It might be that just some random taps that you create yourself would have the same effect on the class. I don't know, but I do know that these have a very calming effect. Now, Karen's going to do one from Body Talk, and that we actually, do you want to tell about the Body Talk experiment at our school?
Oh, yeah. Several years ago, a group of local Body Talk practitioners contacted the school. They were looking around for opportunities to do kind of a research project with children to see what effect, if any, Body Talk would have. And so we got associated with them somehow, I'm not sure how, and agreed that they would come twice a week for 8 weeks to work on any child whose parents approved. And they would do what was called the access technique, and there's 5 techniques within that, and I'm going to teach you one in a few minutes. And it was very interesting. They would come, and it would take maybe 5 or 10 minutes with each child. Sometimes they would just do the first 4, and once a week they'd do the whole 5. And it was very interesting, especially because once it was all over, when they asked kids at the time, they would say, well, you know, did you notice any difference? How do you feel now? And the kids would kind of go, you know, well. But once the 8 weeks was over and they weren't going to be coming anymore, we got so many comments from the kids about, when are they coming back again? You know, I just felt more, they had a difficult time finding words to describe what effect it had had on them. But maybe you can remember somebody's comment, I can't remember exactly, but they felt good. Sandy Ken, which was?
Yeah, actually, I noticed that the kids that tended to have trouble focusing and trouble with attention, they're the ones who liked it the most. And I know when they would come was always during our math period. And so they'd be at the back of the room, we'd be doing math and, one by one or whatever, they'd go back and do that. And I remember one student in particular saying that, oh, I love it when they come. I can always focus on my math better. I can do my math better afterward. And they did. My class loved it. And they really, really missed it when they were gone. And we continued to practice some of the things you can do on yourself fairly often after that. In fact, Usha was mentioning the other day that she just happened to see one of the older boys, one of the boys in these pictures, doing that to himself on his own at one point when, she said she caught him doing that. It was like, oh my gosh, who knew that they would just even do it on their own, without being directed.
The most important of the 5 techniques that make up the Access program, which was, Body Talk is very extensive and complicated, but they've taken 5 of the techniques from it and put them together in a simplified version that anybody can learn and that can be done by anyone, anywhere. And it does not take long to learn. I'm going to teach you one of those, and it's considered to be the most important of those 5. It's called cortices. And the purpose of this particular one is to integrate the 2 hemispheres of the brain and to just help develop coherence among all the parts of the cerebral cortex. And if that happens, obviously you can function better in a number of ways. And you can do it on another person, and you can just do it on yourself, and we'll just do it on ourselves today. And I'll tell you what the difference is if you're doing it on someone else. The first parts of it are identical. So, before I do that, I wanted to tell you just one incident when you can use cortices as part of a first aid technique as well. I had a first grade student who was extremely reactive. He was pretty new to us. And anyway, one day we were at snack and he had a little can of Vienna sausages and he took the lid off. It was one of those pull tab metal lids. And he took it off, and as he was reaching in, it was very sharp. He just sliced open his finger and its blood's gushing out. It hurt, of course, but mostly I think just seeing the sight of the blood is just, he's freaking out and crying and wailing. And we took him up to the office and sat him on the counter and put pressure on it and all that. And then I said to him, because we'd done this in class a few times, I said, would it be okay if I do cortices on you? And he, oh, yeah. And so I did, and it was just amazing. In just the couple minutes it took to do that, he calmed down significantly. His breathing rate slowed way down. He was, still crying a little bit, but not the major sobs and not that freaked out sort of energy he'd been exhibiting before that. So you just use your 2 hands. You begin at the back of your skull. There's that little dip. And you just put one hand there. You're going to use your other hand to tap. And we're going to tap the top of our head and then our sternum around the heart center. You want to be sure that you're crossing the midline of your skull. So you don't want to be tapping this way. You want to be going crossways. Okay, and you do 1 inhalation and exhalation while you're tapping on your head. So breathing slowly. And then 1 breath on your sternum. And again, kind of crosswise. Then you want to move up 1 hand width. And for some people, it's easy just to switch hands as you do that. You don't need to. Another hand width. And if you get to the part where your hand's covering up the area where you've been tapping, just move to a different section. Just be sure that you're continuing to cross the midline. And when you get to the point where you're just above your eyebrows, pause until we all get there. Part of the timing difference is the length of your breath. You're breathing a little faster, and also the width of your hand, the size of your head. Okay, now the final part is
Karen,
the two...
my mic needs to pick you up.
Oh, the final part is with the two sides of your head. If you just put your hands above your ears with your fingers pointing toward the back, if you were doing this on someone else, you would have them hold one hand and you would hold the other side. So you have a free hand to tap. When you're doing it to yourself, obviously you don't have three hands. So you imagine that your hand is still holding the side that it's not while you tap. And then with the other side. And that's all. And it's very good for stress. So if you're, for instance, in a traffic jam and you can have your hands off your steering wheel for a few minutes, sitting there anyway, it's a great thing to do. And you can do it multiple times with no problem.
So probably the most well-known of these is Brain Gym. And I don't want to spend a lot of time teaching you all these things. This could be one whole day's class itself, just these different energy work modalities that you can do with kids. But I used to study Brain Gym extensively some years ago, and I have a lot of information. If you want more information, you can look at this folder. And I have a wonderful testimonial for Brain Gym, because when I was really studying it and using it a lot with kids, Priya's son Keith was in my class. And he's presently an airline pilot, and so
He's a corporate jet pilot.
Corporate jet pilot. He flies moneyed people around. So you want to tell what he said? It happened to say to you at dinner this week.
Well, actually, he was up. He was up just this week, and we were sitting at the table, my dinner table, with Bruce and Carol Melner. I don't know how many of you know Bruce and Carol, but Bruce was the principal of Ananda School for years, and Carol taught the junior high there. And she's also an author. They've both written a number of books that are teacher guides and so forth to the Dawn publication books. All that to say, we were at the table and somehow Brain Gym came up. And he said, and he's 25 years old, 25-year-old guy. He said, you know, I still use Brain Gym. When I'm in the plane and we're in bad weather or I know that I need to focus, he says I start doing some cross crawls and I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, we were all just, because I knew he had done that. He'd been a ski racer in high school. And he would do these strange things at the top of the mountain, and the kids would say, what in the world are you doing? And he did very well. But it just really helped him focus. It helped settle him down. And he says, I don't know how it works, but it just seems to work. So that was just this week he told me.
And I think Helen's going to, are you going to do figure eights as part of your thing at some point? Yeah, so we're not going to talk more about that, but Helen will demonstrate some Brain Gym with you. Just to say, and then recently we came across energy medicine, which is Donna Eden. You may know of Donna Eden, who's written the book Energy Medicine and One Energy Medicine for Women. And she has some great techniques that we've been using with the kids. And all of these can be found online. And just to say, that these are different modes being used by different people at this time. Truth is universally rooted, and people are becoming more aware of energy work and how that might affect us. And I say, if you don't buy into it and believe it's really doing anything, it is doing something, even if it's the placebo effect, and it just has to do with touch and rhythm and doing a coordinated sense of movements. But I would really like to fly on a jet with somebody that I knew had just done Brain Gym. That's all I've got to say.
I
I say something about the EFT?
Quickly, please.
Very quickly. My 70-year-old father discovered it on the internet, and it's changed his life. He's off medications. He's developing, interest in introspection and quality of life. And, it's really changed his life.
Now that is a testimonial. All of this works for all ages, of course. It's Bob, our videographer,